Welcome back to Ravens Recap. We have a really cool show today. Football is back starting this week that we're recording. There will be a football game until the Super Bowl, which is super exciting. And for this episode, we have a really special guest. Jason from Huddle It Up Films is joining us. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited, very excited for it. Like you said, football season's here, and we have some players to talk about, and that's right in my wheelhouse of what I could do all day. So thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to be talking about the traits to be looking out for during the preseason games. There's a lot of positional battles going on, a lot of players we want to know more about, particularly, last year we didn't have the preseason. So even rookies from last year, we don't know too much about them because they didn't get much time in the limelight. So we're looking forward to having this conversation and breaking it down.
Yeah. Well, before we get into it, I just want to acknowledge here. So, Jason, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just want to let everybody know who maybe hasn't heard of your work. But for anybody who hasn't, Jason's Huddle It Up Films. It's on YouTube. It's a great follow. A lot of film study breakdowns, and I think recently been interviewing a lot of fans and listeners and stuff like that to just kind of have like these little bite-sized discussion pieces and things like that. I think it's a great mix of content. So if you guys are interested in that, if you're on YouTube, if you like that content, I think it's a great follow. Love the work you've been doing, man.
Thank you so much. I hope the coach's tape is something we can continue to do on YouTube. There's some questions about that, but my outlook on it is the fans deserve to see it and judge for themselves. So when you can see all 22 guys moving, you can see why what you saw on TV happened. So it's educational. It's not really flashy highlights. I do some film breakdowns. I have had some guests on, which has been a lot of fun getting to know people. And maybe that's one of the reasons I'm here. So I always say football is family, and I'm there to support anybody that supports the Ravens.
Awesome. Yeah, I tell you, man, if you're listening to our show and you don't watch Jason's stuff, like you should probably unsubscribe from our show. Like you don't have enough time. You should be listening to his stuff. It's great. That's like how much we like it. So
awesome.
Definitely an awesome follow. And you can really there's a nice aspect of the video being able to see, what you're talking about, highlighting the players. So I think we should get started with the wide receiver 6 kind of discussion. It doesn't seem like the Ravens will hold on to 7 wide receivers. And I tell you, with the drumbeat going around Prochet, it almost feels like it might be over. This guy is playing really well. It looks like he put in a ton of work during the offseason, snagging balls. But of course, Boykin will be there competing. And Jaylon Moore, who a lot of people have liked from previous camps, all trying to make a name for themselves. So I was just thinking that would be a good place to start, particularly with the practice everyone got to see over the weekend. That kind of creates some buzz around this topic.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, I am known, at least to those who know me, as a Prochet defender, supporter, believer, leader of the bandwagon. I mean, this is a guy that I rarely get this hype for a guy that was drafted in the 6th round, but he slipped through the cracks, in my opinion, because of his size and measurables. And to me, there's more than traits. A trait is a easy word that translates to people to understand. But I think that a lot of times they look at trait as a physical trait. And to me, the physical trait are the givens that you have. You get those from the raw numbers. So when I look at the traits of a player, it's more like translatable skills, where there's a more succinct way to describe it. But what Prochet does is a little bit of everything at a high level, at an NFL level. And the only thing that works against him is the fact that he's 5'11" and runs into 4.5s.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, that is the concern, right? So you have a guy like Boykin who just screams, particularly for Ravens fans who've been wanting that just big wide receiver that can take over a game. He just screams like he should be the guy, particularly. And also when you have a bunch of other small guys with Duvernay and Hollywood, it's not like we're lacking little speedsters. And that's not exactly what Prochet is. This is a guy who's he finds a way to catch anything in the vicinity. It's wild. I saw some of the catches, and I know they weren't hitting, so it's different. You don't want to get too excited, but it looks like he put in a lot of work this offseason.
He
And
sure did. He's a hard worker in the first place. He had a reputation for that at SMU. And if you follow him, you just get a sense of how businesslike he is. Um, the thing that I like about Prochet is, and this is part of where the numbers can deceive you. If you look at the quickness drills, which are the 3-cone and the shuttle drills, for anybody that doesn't know, the 3-cone drill is where you're pretty much running in an L shape in a swervy fashion. And the shuttle drill is where you're doing what looks like a suicide if you ever did those in gym class. Run up to the line, touch it, run back to the line, touch it, that kind of thing. Now, if you look at the way Prochet and Boykin scored on those, Boykin is much faster, almost a half second faster, I believe, on the shuttle than Prochet. So if you look at it from just a raw number standpoint, you say, oh, well, Boykin, not only is he faster than Prochet, he's quicker than Prochet too. And then look what you see on the field, guys. It's the exact opposite. So sometimes you have to really trust your eyes and see and notice that the sharp breaks that Prochet makes will translate to the NFL, where if it's Boykin, once his stride length is lengthened and he's at full speed, if you told all the receivers to stop while they're at full speed, Boykin's going to end up 5 yards past them all. So there are a lot of qualities that go into it. Ball tracking, the timing in your route. You've noticed I put up a YouTube video today of where I thought the exact point Lamar Jackson lost confidence in Boykin. And basically, Lamar's trying to throw it to him. Boykin's not looking. Lamar's trying to throw it to him. Boykin's not looking. And that's something that you learn, like, even if you didn't play football and street ball. It's like, get open, look back at the quarterback, scream his name if you have to, put up your hand, make that last little cut or move to let him know where to throw it. And that's something that that Boykin really struggles with, and I haven't seen any progress. So after about week 3 last year, I was on the Prochet bandwagon saying, look, I mean, we went to Des Bryant late in the season. I would have loved to see Prochet defy some odds and get some slot time, even though we have Willie Snead firmly entrenched in that role.
Yeah, I think you bring up a bunch of great points here in the argument between the Ravens giving Prochet a look over Boykin coming up this season. And I mean, I love what you're saying here of we're waiting for Boykin to step up and to demand the ball and to just have his head better in the game. It does feel like he hasn't really developed terribly much. I'm thinking back to, the 3 of us went to see the first Ravens preseason game of 2019 against Jacksonville, and the Ravens were just feeding the ball to Boykin, just kept peppering him with targets over and over again. And, I remember Chris at the time said, this guy's not getting much separation at all. And it still really hasn't changed. You look at a lot of Boykin's catches last year, particularly his big plays, they were schemed routes where he was just wide open, and it was pretty easy for Lamar to get the ball to him and for him to get a big gain. And yeah, I think if you look at James Prochet, you brought up, he's 5'11", ran a 4.5 40. Who's another guy who fits the same measurables who we've talked a lot about in recent podcasts. Derek Mason, 5'11", ran a 4.45 40. I'm looking at it right now on Wikipedia.
That's a good one. That's a really good
Combine.
comparison, actually. I love that. Go ahead, Peter. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think I love what you're saying about how you can look at these guys' measurables on as far as what they do at the combine, what they do at practice. But once the pads come on, it's a completely different story. And, I have not looked at Prochet as closely as you have, but I am really excited to see some extended action from him this coming preseason. And I agree. I agree with you that it's a great opportunity for him to show what he can do for this team. And I think that is a lot of potential there, and he probably does have an inside track over Boykin just from this, that he's made a measurable improvement over this offseason, which we're still waiting to see more of from Boykin.
And it's a shame about Boykin because there are, I want to mention what I think are positive NFL qualities for Boykin, and that is his catch radius. And despite the drops he's had, reported drops this offseason in training camp, he has pretty good hands. He's made some decent catches, so I don't question his hands at all. I think he's got good hands, and I think that if he's matched up against a tight end or a safety in the slot, he can beat that guy. Or if he's running zone against zone defenses in the middle, he can win those matchups. When you put him outside against an NFL cornerback, though, he's just too easy to cover. And I've been saying it for a while. I was one of those things where you wish you were wrong. And then the other thing is, if you have a 50-50 ball, Prochet is 5 inches shorter, I guess, than Boykin. You want Prochet on that ball. If anybody's listening and they haven't seen just the highlights, you don't even have to do film study. Go on YouTube, type in James Prochet highlights, and then get on Twitter afterwards and thank me later, because you won't see greater circus catches, high pointing the ball tracking, out muscling bigger players. Like, Prochet is just not going to be one of these little slot receivers. He may not get that opportunity a lot in the NFL, but if it's a contested catch or a catch through contact, man, Prochet's got you there too. So it's not just the quickness that he has on his side.
Yeah, the thing that really struck me when I was watching the practice is, like you said, if you watch the drills, you had no idea who was faster. You would think that Prochet was faster and that Boykin was like lumbering, right? Like, oh, he must get away because he's tall, because he just does not look nearly as crisp in those cuts. And he doesn't have like quite that instant acceleration. It's the stride length thing, like you said. And in the NFL, if you beat him like that and the ball gets there, I mean, that's 15 yards. Like, that's all you need. Like, you don't need that long runway speed, because how long does that develop, right? Like, how often can you actually develop that? And if that's all you've got, if that's your one trick, it's not going to work out.
Exactly. I think this might be a good time to transition to Benjamin Victor, because I'm going to touch on some things that Boykin doesn't do that I think if we do in fact trade Boykin or IR him now that he's hurt, might be a good idea. Heard it here first, but maybe throw him on IR and give it a little time to marinate and see if we got a spot for him later. But Benjamin Victor out of Ohio State is a guy that I looked at a lot coming out of the draft, who is 6'4", just like Boykin, but he plays like a lot of Ravens fans would expect Boykin to play. His ability to high point the ball, and the thing that sticks out, the skill trait, whatever you want to call it, is his body control. He's got the body control of, say, like a basketball player, the grace that you see from some of the better tight ends and smaller receivers. So if it's a throw at the back of the end zone, if you want that big possession receiver who can run a slant, or say it's the end of the half and you need to use the sideline or red zone, Benjamin Victor, you're going to get those qualities out of him. He's a 4.6 guy, so you don't get the flashy speed, but I honestly don't think his play speed is that different than Boykin. A guy that'll probably you'll be able to stash on the practice squad unless he blows up this preseason. So Benjamin Victor, I would say, if you're, instead of cutting Prochet, you want a bigger body, Victor is the guy I would look at to stash on this team somewhere.
Interesting. We got him as a futures contract. I was actually not even aware of his.
Yeah, and the thing is, Alec, like, he played for the Giants last year, and I don't know, maybe you guys can help me remember this, but I remember a slew of injuries for them, like Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton's always hurt. I think Golden Tate missed time. So it was pretty puzzling. Evan Ingram, who's a big guy, I think missed time. He misses time every year. Mm-hmm. I might be wrong about one of those, but I guess overall they were pretty banged up as a wide receiver unit, and they just let this guy go. So who knows, maybe there's some red flags there, but that's a guy whose skill set I like as a situational fourth receiver.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, the only other point that maybe to go with that, although we should probably move on to tight end 3 and pretty soon, but that was kind of the one thing I wanted to bring up was that, if we're talking just player to player for the wide receiver 6 position, I think, Prochet, it seems like we're all in agreement here that he's kind of, got a lot of the intangibles that you would want in terms of like a purely just, matching up skills to skills kind of thing. But the one thing I'm sure a lot of fans would probably question, to play devil's advocate is, does Boykin bring anything to the table that Prochet doesn't? And is that valuable, right? Is there anybody else that can reproduce what Boykin can do?
And it shows up on special teams, and for your wide receiver 6, you better be able to contribute on special teams. So as weird as this may sound, Boykin's ability as a gunner, it can Sean Wade, can Brandon Stevens, other guys who play special teams. To me, it's not the blocking receiver aspect. I think Sammy and Rashad can get that done. But Boykin was your gunner, which is a very important position. So Boykin's chances to make the roster may actually depend on can anybody step up and fill his special team role.
Yeah, we did see Chris Moore hang on to the roster for a pretty long while for that exact same reason.
For sure.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. I was thinking about it on the on the way home. And I did want to talk real quick before we leave the wide receiver room about Tylan Wallace, because everyone's already drooling about Bateman. I am too. I think he's the real deal. I think we did it. I'm curious how Tylan Wallace can fit into this whole conversation, because a lot of people really like this player as well. And it's starting to seem like we have a very crowded room that, a year ago wasn't like that.
Sure. And I really like Wallace. I think the reason he was drafted was because he was the best player available. And you guys probably said that on your show too. There wasn't a true need. It was just, this was the guy that was available in the 4th round that many expected to go in the 2nd round. So at that point, the value just trumped any other factors that you had. And I really like a lot of things about Tylan Wallace. I think that they want to put him in the slot. He mentioned that in his press conference. I was wondering if he was going to be used on the left side and compete over there and get some snaps with Sammy and Bateman, but he actually mentioned using the slot. So that might be a little bit of a transition for him, but there's a lot to like about Tylan Wallace. A lot of the same things as Prochet. Decent route runner, not as good as Prochet, but you're talking about a tough guy that plays above his weight. And I saw the comparison, and I really apologize to the person that I can't think of your name right now, but Hines Ward. And I thought that was a really interesting comparison. Ravens fans remember him well. Will knock your block off in the run game. Plays bigger than you would expect. I mean, Wallace is 5'11", Hines Ward and Wallace play like they're 6'2".
Yeah, I thought he was taller, to be honest. I was looking it up before we talked about him, and I was like, oh, really? He's 5'11". Like, he doesn't play like that. Just like you said, just watching the film I saw of him, he plays bigger. And yeah, if he's able to come in and be that blocking guy, which is why I looked it up, I was like, how big is he? If he can provide that kind of blocks that everyone, drools over Boykin's ability to do, which, I mean, legitimately, he did extend plays last year. That was like one of his biggest values. I think then, that makes it even easier. I think he makes the roster over Boykin almost regardless, but I think it makes it even easier for us to transition away.
For sure, man. I hope he gets worked in slowly and not rushed in, because Wallace, I think, is a guy who will stay on his rookie contract throughout. He's just solid and steady. The only thing I worry about with him is the ACLs, and people blew this up as a big deal because his brother had 3 knee injuries that ended his college career, his football career, really. And I'm like, well, who cares? It's his brother. That's not him. Well, it turns out that's his twin brother. So I'm not a scientist or biologist or anything, but that kind of like, well, wait a minute, do they share the exact same DNA? Like, so maybe that was a reason that he dropped. But I love Tylan Wallace, the football player. I hope he stays healthy and stays here for all 4 years.
All right. Well, that's certainly, wide receiver, a position that the Ravens have had a lot of trouble with over the years. But, certainly a lot of excitement to look at as far as the depth is concerned at that position. And then transitioning from a position that the Ravens have struggled with historically to one that they've actually been pretty solid at over the years. Tight end, we know that Mark Andrews is definitely the number 1 guy. But then after that, we have some questions. Nick Boyle is going to be the number 2 if he's healthy to start the season. Hopefully that'll be the case, and he'll be back full strength, because we know how important Boyle is to the run game. And he's starting to become a little bit of a red zone presence too. He's had a couple touchdowns over the past 2 seasons after having none to start his career. But tight end 3 is definitely a position that is going to attract a lot of intrigue during the preseason. As we all know, Hayden Hurst had a big role in that 2019 offense that was lacking last year. And there's a lot of names here that could potentially step up and be that guy for the Ravens, or even take some time at tight end too if Boyle needs some time to get back into the swing of things. And I think what's interesting is that you got a lot of different skill sets with all these guys. Like, you got some guys who are much more blockers, some guys who are much more receivers, and there's a lot of different ways the Ravens could go here.
It sure is. And I think that we're in the dark about this because of Boyle's health. Like, this would be a much easier conversation to have if we knew if Boyle's going to be 100% to start the season, whether he's going to be limited for the first handful of games. It really would make it easier to predict, in my opinion, who else is going to make the roster and what they're looking for in their 3rd, possibly 4th tight end.
I think it's worth talking about both scenarios. So I think with all things equal, everyone's healthy, I think Oliver is a slam dunk. I was probably the most excited person on Ravens Twitter when we signed him. I don't know if I was the only one who knew who he was, but I just remember, and it was funny because when we talked about it on the show, Peter also like might have saw the same tweets about it or whatever, that he was like this like sleeper tight end guy in the fantasy football world. And I looked into him at that time and I was like, oh yeah, I can see this. Like he seems like a talented player. And then they just got rid of him. And Jacksonville, I don't think they know what they're doing over there. I really don't. You know, new coaching staff, like I don't have that much confidence in them. They drafted ETN way too high, like in my opinion. Like that's not the way to build your team. That's rebuilding, but so be it. And I think they just let this guy leave because he was from the old regime. And I think he might be a huge steal. And a lot of people are seeing that he's doing well in camp. And I'm very excited to have that player on our team. I think he's going to make it. I think we're losing that comp pick or the conditional pick rather for him. And I think he makes it almost either way because I think if Boyle's not able to go, they're going to just put him on the 6-week return, or is it 3 weeks this year? Whatever it is for like IR, I think they'll just give him the time to be able to come back and they get 2 guys on the roster and they'll figure it out later. That's my hunch.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to weigh in there? Because I have definitely a lot of thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was just going to say, I feel like I haven't seen a whole lot of tape from Eli Wolf probably since like the 2019 preseason, whatever the last preseason I think that we went to. I feel like I haven't seen him play since then. So I really don't know too much to expect there. Just because he's had game experience, Tomlinson, if Boyle isn't going to play, I feel like he kind of has a leg up in terms of just like a pure blocker. It wouldn't be that bad to keep him there, even if it's only for a few more weeks. But other than that, I feel like I haven't seen a whole lot of tape on some of these other guys. So I'm interested to see your take, Jason.
Sure. Eli Wolf, if I was to explain it to somebody in the simplest terms, one that you could pick at, and get specific on me, but think of a poor man's Hayden Hurst. That's what I see with Eli Wolf. He can block, not as well as Hurst can block, in my opinion. He has some work to do. He can catch. He's got a little bit of juice. His 40 times were all over the place, and they weren't reliable. I think his school clocked him at a 4.43. He's not running a 4.43 at tight end. So I think you can throw that out. But I think it's safe to say that Eli Wolf is a 4.5 type of guy. He's pretty fast for a tight end. He has decent receiving skills. He can block. They said a poor man's Hayden Hurst is the best way I could describe him. If you want kind of a do-it-all tight end, that could be a guy to go to. But I just wanted to touch on the other guys real quick. Josh Oliver, I'm totally with Alec. And as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with Dev Panchwal about this. And the thing that really sticks out to me about Oliver is what Alex said. We got him for a 7th-round conditional pick. And this is a guy, when you get drafted in the 3rd round out of a smaller school, you're doing something right. And there's some like really good qualities that you have about him. And I don't know if you guys saw the stadium practice, but you got to see he's got real ball skills, real body control, almost like I mentioned with Benjamin Victor. Josh Oliver is a bigger guy than Victor, but his body control for a tight end is top notch. And I love talking to Dev about that. He brought up his past, and that was a great conversation. And then one guy that we didn't talk about, I want to say first, Tomlinson. If Boyle's going to be out, Tomlinson's got to make this team. The most solid, steady veteran blocker. And when people talk about Boyle as a blocker, they just leave it at, well, he's one of the best he's the best blocking tight end in the league. But it's a little bit deeper than that. When you look at where they line Boyle up and what they ask him to block, who they ask him to block, it's everywhere. Like if you want to say who's your best tight end to line up next to the right tackle and block a defensive end, it's Nick Boyle. If you want to put somebody in motion and attack a linebacker, who's your best guy? Nick Boyle. You want a big guy to go out and cut the secondary. I'm sure you guys can picture it. We've seen it so many times. Boyle with the cut block, it's Nick Boyle. So it's not just he's a great blocker. He's great at every single kind of block. And I was really impressed with Eric Tomlinson last year, how he came in and took most of that responsibility. Ricard took on some duties, but if Boyle's not ready, Tomlinson should make this team. And then the wild card is Tony Poljan. This guy is super intriguing, 6'7", and he did a Brandon Stevens where he played quarterback I think he was like an all-state quarterback. I wonder if I have it written down. Central Michigan. So he was the Michigan State Player of the Year or whatever as a quarterback. Went to Central Michigan, played quarterback, decided he wanted to graduate transfer to Virginia, and held his own as a 6'7" tight end. I mean, red zone threat. He looks extremely awkward to me sometimes with the way he moves, but it's a strange awkward because he has those quarterback skills. Like he led the league or led the state in like as an option quarterback, if you can imagine. So he's got some skills, but he's 6'7". So, once you get over a certain height, it's tough to have like short, compact, muscle memory driven legs. So I think he's going to have to work on his blocking, considering it's a new position for him. You can't just say, hey, you're big, go block a defensive end, go block Clowney. But they definitely an interesting guy. I was glad that we picked up as an undrafted free agent this year.
Yeah, all great points there. I really agree with what you guys are saying about Oliver. I think he's extremely intriguing. And like we said, the Ravens got him for practically nothing. And the upside there is huge. And if he doesn't pan out, then, they gave up pretty much nothing for him. So he's going to get a huge look during the preseason. It'll be really interesting to see what happens when you get the pads on. I think you brought up a great point with Tomlinson. He really was a pretty overlooked member of the team last year with what he did in Boyle's absence, and for the Ravens run game to not only not lose a step, but pretty much eclipse what they were able to do before Boyle was out. Not that was Boyle's fault. There was of reasons as to why the run game was struggling in that time. So yeah, if Boyle's out, then he's definitely has to be on the roster. I do think that Jacob Breland is an intriguing player, but I just think the injury history with him missing all of last year, and he landed on the sorry, magic of editing.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten out of the tub yet, Peter. Like he can't get on the field.
Yeah, he's a guy that I was looking at when we were doing our pre-draft show for the 2020 draft, and he was a guy I thought he was intriguing that the Ravens could get late in the draft as a guy they could have tried out at the number 3 tight end position last year, and they ended up getting him undrafted. But it looks like he has potential. The problem is he had that ACL injury that ended his college career early and just hasn't been getting healthy. So I think he's an extreme long shot to make the team and to compete for a position on this team. But yeah, I think everything we're saying, there's a lot of intrigue here at this group.
There's one more thing that I wanted to add, and that is that Ben Mason was drafted. They made him a tight end, or announced him as a tight end, I believe, on purpose, just to kind of take the pressure off on why are we drafting another fullback. But he played exclusively fullback in college. His blocking assignments are that of a fullback. He actually was pretty darn good on the goal line, in my opinion. It wasn't a lot of tape on it, obviously, but it's a big dude that handled the ball, got his pad level low, and drove the pile. But I don't know what they're going to do with Ben Mason. It was curious to me that they did label him as a tight end, announce him as a tight end. I think even on the website, it has him, or the Ravens roster, I think it marks him as a tight end. Yeah. So I'm super curious to see what's going on. It's not a pick that I liked, to be honest. And saying that, I hope I buy his jersey in a couple of years. But what that tells me is they're coming to the realization that they may get priced out on the Patrick Ricard sweepstakes next year. So that's the best way I could explain that pick away.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really good transition into kind of the Dimeback safety role that we're looking into, because a similar pick for the Ravens was Brendan Stevens, who's in a short amount of time in camp quickly silencing the critics. Apparently, the guy looks like he knows how to play the ball, play the game. And I think between him and the plethora of other options, one guy undrafted, Adarius Washington, who he could have went much higher. People are wondering why he wasn't drafted. I think there's a lot of interesting talent. Of course, last year's PFF darling, Geno Stone, and then camp warrior, no pun intended, of Nigel Warrior, right? Like he was a huge name last year in camp. A lot of people thought he could make the roster. And then, of course, Jordan Richards. I think there's a lot of players kind of competing for that extra safety, dime back role, maybe special teams as well. And I think there are a lot of interesting players.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember here is that in the dime packages, the dime back is actually Chuck Clark or Deshaun Elliott. So a lot of people think that your dime back is your deep back, the deep safety in those coverages. It's really not. The dime backer is a freed up position, freed up responsibilities to kind of put it the best way I could put it is to freestyle. And Chuck Clark is awesome in that role with his instincts, his ability to tackle. Chuck's just a heads up player. But the Ravens reduced their dime packages last year. I had a long discussion with Ken McCusick on my channel about this because they didn't have anybody that they trusted to play on the back end. So they had Levine, they had Richards. They didn't trust those guys to play the back end. And Brandon Stevens screams out to me a guy that could cover that role because of his pure speed, his physicality. But it's a big ask, guys. What do you think about sticking a rookie in our dime packages, playing like a single high or split safety look in the back end of your defense, a rookie, and trusting a rookie with basically what Earl Thomas and Eric Weddle were in charge of.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I'd have to imagine it'd be some sort of rotation unless, we got to see a lot more tape on Stevens and he can lock down that job day one. But I would imagine you have to rotate him, back at least to the start, maybe with, if Jimmy Smith, if all our corners are healthy, knock on wood, like he might be able to slide into that role. If Chris Board makes the roster, potentially he might be another option. He did a little bit of that. It's not ideal. I probably wouldn't prefer it, but I'm sure that they could find somebody to kind of rotate him until he's ready to take that on full time.
Sure, and of course, Board's not going to play your deep safety. He's lined up as a linebacker. A lot of people would call him the dime back, but it's really a nickel look if you have two linebackers on the field. So I'm looking at that back end is specifically what I was talking about. Jimmy played it early when Tavon was healthy. That first game, Jimmy Smith was on the back end. They trust him, so you can put Jimmy back there. But he might be a player that you don't ask to play 20 snaps a dime. Maybe you mix Stevens in. And if he's not ready, if they don't like either one of those options, Ardarius Washington, his instincts are off the charts. One of the best pure football players. Like he reminded me of Antoine Winfield of last year. And I think if he would have I think he ran close to 4.6, like 4.59. If he was a 4.4 guy, he would have been drafted around where Winfield was last year because he's just that darn good of a football player, man. I mean, it's his size and speed are the only things negative I can say about Ardarius Washington. I hope he makes this team, and I would be comfortable. So, yeah, if you're looking at a dime back, you really, like I said, you have to think of it. You're going to have Chuck Clark and maybe Elliott in the box playing those intermediate. You may or be looking for a safety that can cover the deep end and rotate in with Jimmy. So that I'll play a lot into that conversation. And then Warrior, I don't know what you guys think about him, but excuse me, both him and Stone have some hybrid qualities as far as they're not great strong safeties or free safeties. They kind of profile as a mix of both, almost like in a Deshaun Elliott type of style player.
So when you look at all these guys, when we're watching the preseason games, what are the things you're going to be looking out for? And another kind of question I was thinking about for a future competition battle here is how do you best judge them against the different levels of talent, right? So if, let's say, Ardarius Washington gets to go with the ones, just for example's sake, and then we don't see Nigel Warrior start playing until the threes are out, how best do you decide? Are you going to be maybe looking to see, okay, now the next week they rotate them so they get a better look? Is that the kind of thing you're looking for, to be like, okay, Nigel Warrior's performance against the threes has warranted more time against higher competition?
I think, Alec, one of the big things is where are they playing in the defense? So I want to know who they're lining up deep in these three safety packages. Like, that's the big thing for me as far as what they're looking for. And the way you're going to make this team is in the dime package or on special teams. So instead of looking at the 2 or 3 plays where they're actually involved in the play, look where they're lining up before the play is what I would say, because that's indicating what they're doing in practice, which we don't get to see. So yeah, are they comfortable enough with Warrior to put him in the back end of dime packages, or Geno Stone, who's a really smart player, very instinctive player, but is kind of a little more clunky as a mover? Do they trust Ardarius and his size and speed in the back end? Because if they don't, it's going to be hard for those guys to make the team. You'd be basically filling in for Chuck Clark at that point as a backup, if you're not trusted to take some responsibility in the back end of that defense. So dime defense, 3 corners, 3 safeties on the field. When you see 3 corners and 3 safeties, who are the 3 safeties and where are they lined up? And I think that could tell you a lot, or you can kind of read into it from there.
Yeah, and to kind of go off my previous point of, all right, we're going to be seeing these different players against different levels of talent. It's impossible really for them to play every single game. I'm mostly talking about left guard. We know it's a big battle right now with Powers, Cleveland, and Phillips, essentially. And whilst everyone was saying, oh, we think it's going to be Cleveland because of the way Harps talked about him and just the way he plays, I think you didn't see that going into camp. Now, it could just be, let the rookie earn it. But they started, I think, with Phillips, and then they rotated to Powers with the first team, and then Cleveland got a shot the 3rd day. So when you're looking at this competition, what are the best things to keep an eye on?
And there are a few things on this one. It's a confusing situation to me because as thin as we are at tackle, I was really surprised to see Tyree lining up at left guard throughout the stadium practice. No reps at right tackle. They just let Michael Schofield be a turnstile over there. Even without pads on, it was like, oh my goodness, what is this guy doing? So it kind of alarmed me. But the big thing to look for, I think, is the movement skills of these players. Now, Tyree Phillips has got all the athletic ability in the world. His problem last year was just mentally picking up the game. And of course, not having an offseason really hurt him. But I think the coaches are in love with Tyree Phillips. And the reason I say that is they had Ben Powers and DJ Fluker. Powers was in the system already a year or 2. DJ Fluker's been around the league. What did they do opening day? We're putting the rookie with no training camp in the right guard. So that, when I read between the lines, that tells me the Harbaugh really likes him and rotated him to the very bitter end. If you remember that interception down on the goal line, they stuck with Tyree. So having him at left guard, he may be the best left guard on the team, but for me, it just makes me nervous because I think we'll be okay at left guard regardless of who plays. I'm worried about right tackle or what happens if Stanley goes down or if he's not ready. I would like to see young Tyree get a little bit taken off his plate and just concentrate on playing right tackle. But that's me. So who knows? But yes, they want to move her there is part of the reason I'm not buying Ben Powers.
Yeah, I agree with you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was basically going to say the same, that I do agree that that keeping Phillips at right tackle is, I feel like, what the Ravens should focus on. And I think you bring up a good point with, we don't really know how well Stanley's going to be, how healthy he's going to be to start the season. We're just talking about the same thing with Boyle. We only have so much of a window into that information. But then you also look at the fact that, yes, the Ravens brought in Villanueva for the right tackle role. Villanueva has been a strong player for a while in this league. The Steelers didn't give him up because he's still at the prime of his career. He's 32. He's older, and you're 100% right. If he has to go over to left tackle because Stanley's still hurt, and you also have to think about the future of this team too. How long is Villanueva going to be here? Phillips is a guy that you think that the Ravens can groom to be that right tackle of the future to take over for Orlando Brown. So, agree with what you're saying there with the Ravens focusing Phillips at right tackle.
But regardless, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So, they had McCary working at left tackle at the stadium practice. And who knows, they could just be throwing us off But when I see reports and when I ask specifically, they say, yeah, Tyree's at left guard, which kind of drives me nuts. Powers, he can, or Ben Powers, his limitations are in his movement skills. I think that he's shown us pretty much who he is as a pro last year, which is a guy, if you want to talk about skills and traits, pretty solid, just a little top heavy. He can get thrown off balance, and his recovery skills when he gets beat are actually very good. Like, he's a guy who should be called for a lot of penalties, but he's just that darn good at recovering and getting a piece. And that's really all that Lamar needs. But I can't see Powers pulling. And you know how much our base bread and butter run play is pulling that left guard on that power run to the right. That's something that Ben Cleveland should be very good at. He is a better athlete than people give him credit for. Go ahead and look up his stats. The big man can move. Just because he's an absolute force in the middle, punishing people, doesn't mean that he can't pull. But the thing is, there's more to pulling than just being quick. You saw it with Bozeman, who's not a great athlete. He's so under control at the contact point. His vision is awesome. He'll find his guy and he'll get his body on the guy. It doesn't matter if the guy's cutting him or how he's attacking the play. So how they pull, it's something that I think McCary would actually be really good at if you wanted to throw him in the left guard conversation. But I do believe that McCary will be used as a backup at multiple positions, and they won't want to just throw him in there and risk injury to McCary. So how do you guys, I mean, given everything I said, I'd like to hear what you guys think and how they're going to play this.
Chris?
I was just going to say, it's really interesting with the whole situation with McCary. I remember us talking probably a few months ago at this point about how I thought it was just a terrible idea to move Bozeman to center, just because I thought he had performed pretty well. He's been an excellent puller at the left guard spot, and I figured it would probably be easier to plug somebody in at center, or even like if we had to keep McCary there until other players are ready. But it certainly seems like the coaching staff is kind of in love with him in terms of like that kind of James Hurst role of just not good enough to play anywhere on the line as a starter, but is good enough to play any position if he absolutely has to as a backup. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I would definitely prefer not to have him at tackle if possible. Phillips I definitely think would be preferred there, but yeah, it's really interesting just in general how the Cards have kind of played this position group. It feels like we've been wanting to have a backup tackle for a while now, and we just haven't picked anybody who really fits that role. We just keep trying to find these players in the draft who are these like guard tackle hybrids, but probably slot out to be one of the guard spots. It's kind of weird.
I feel like they must be thinking of Juwan James as like the solution in the future, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise why you wouldn't have Phillips grooming to be an offensive tackle, in my opinion, or at least a depth piece there. They must really like him and think that he's going to recover well from his injury. That's my only rationale, and I don't like it. I'll put it out there. I think they should have. I think it's so much easier to find a guard than a tackle. Like, let Phillips try to be a good tackle and just put all of his time there. We can find guards all day long, because literally half the tackles turn into guards.
Well said. I mean, it's a position we develop very well, offensive line. It's easier to find guards than tackle, the players that can stick at tackle. And to your point, Alec, I mean, we have a pretty stacked team this year. We have a pretty decent shot at, if everything goes well, of being there towards the end of the season. And so, yeah, I mean, Juwan James in the future is great and all. But what about this year? I mean, who's going to be the next man up at tackle if and when somebody goes down? So yeah, it's a definitely a worthwhile discussion. I'm with all you guys. I would really like to see Tyree at right tackle, but if he's the best darn left guard on the team by far, Stanley's in there and Villanueva's in there, I guess I can't complain putting your best five out there. So that would be the counter.
Yeah, I feel like that has to be the case of Tyree must, while he didn't show it his rookie year, his mental intangibles, like his ability to learn, must be like off the charts if the coaching staff really likes him to play all these different spots. I mean, yeah, for a rookie to go in and start at like all of those different spots. And, even though he didn't perform very well, they must really see something like this guy is going to be very special if he can be like a very good guard, but also like a good tackle if needed. He's one of those guys who hopefully just has to have like that mental fortitude and just ability to play, it has the mental fortitude and versatility. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, you know what it reminds me of, guys? It reminds me of the Brandon Stevens pick, to be honest. If you recall, it was like the last pick of the third round last year, too, very close to it. And we came in there and we drafted Phillips. And everyone was kind of scratching their head a little bit. And they must have loved the guy, right? And the same thing happened this year with Brandon Stevens. They drafted him. People started scratching their head. Now, Phillips didn't have quite the rookie year that we maybe hope of Stevens, but he also had very different circumstances with COVID and just kind of being thrown into a position that, if anything, he needed to be groomed for. Like, it wasn't the one that he'd probably be most successful at day one. So, yeah, I think
in two positions that he's never played probably in his life. So I think that's important too. He went from being a left tackle, probably the best guy on the line his whole life, to play in the NFL at right guard and right tackle. No, right guard. No, back to right tackle at the NFL level in the middle of COVID. So I'm sorry, Alec, but I got excited there.
No, you're right, dude. You're 100% right. And I think the segues, man, today, they've been going running themselves, like from like a teachability, right? Like we're saying that Phillips, must be like being able to learn from the coaching staff, and they really like what they see. Man, I'm seeing a lot out of Oweh already. It seems like he's just soaking up everything they're telling him, and getting me more and more excited about his talent. We knew that he was probably a home run swing from DaCosta, and maybe not necessarily even for this year, but the more and more you see of him, he's definitely going to play a role. Now, this topic was a little bit different when I first wrote the document, because we didn't just had signed Justin Houston. Now, this really changes the way we look at the back end of this rotation, because now our outside linebacker edge position is stacked. I think we have a very solid group, and I'm curious to see how guys like Sack Daddy Ferguson and Chris Smith, Chauncey Rivers, Aaron Adoye, do they have a role in this team? Are they going to make it? And if so, what is it that we have to see from them this preseason to feel that way?
I actually think Chauncey Rivers and Chris Smith are both long shots. And the reason is because they do not fit the prototypical mold of a outside linebacker in Baltimore. They're both 6'1", 6'2". They're both 260 pounds. So you're talking about, if you guys understand, this is more of a player with their hand in their dirt. Think of maybe a McPhee type, but McPhee is a little taller than that. But Chris Smith and Chauncey Rivers, I'm looking Smith 6'1", 266, Rivers 6'2", 262. So those guys are going to have to be able, if you're looking for certain traits to watch for this preseason, it would be the ability for them to flex inside and provide a pass rush on the inside, like a McPhee does at outside linebacker.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And it's just, I think it also just comes down to a numbers game, and that the fact that the Ravens were able to get Houston and everything that he's been able to do in his career, what he brings to the table. They're looking for less now because they've filled a huge need of a consistent guy on the edge who can get to the quarterback. And I think just you look at the other guys, they've got the coverage linebacker in Bowser, and they got the run stuffer in Ferguson, and Oweh, they're going to work him in, obviously. And I think, at that point, there just doesn't really seem like that, unless maybe as like one of the last players on the roster, would these guys even have a shot at making the team?
I think it's going to take an injury, because you look at Dalen Hayes, a guy that you didn't mention there, and he said in his press conference that they were working him in at defensive end in their sub packages, and that's the role I was just talking about that Chris Smith would play. So if you're looking at Smith, Chauncey Rivers playing the 5-tech, well, hey, we just drafted a guy in the 5th round to do that, whose coverage skills are, he's a mini Tyus Bowser. You look at Dalen Hayes. I believe in this guy a lot. I believe that he'll be able to cover at an NFL level right away. Wink loves his versatility. So imagine Dalen Hayes being one of those guys that they stuff up at the line of scrimmage in front of a guard who can drop and actually make a play and cover. That's why I think Dalen Hayes is going to have a role on this team, and it's going to be tough for the other two.
Yeah, I didn't mention him because I think he's a lock. He's the draft pick of ours. We don't like to get rid of those. And also, like you said, I like him a lot from what I've been able to see so far and the way the Ravens want to use him, the way they're talking about him. It seems like he's a part of the plans. So he's not even in the battle. It's curious to see how they're going to execute using him, particularly right away. I think for both him and Oweh, it's not so much we know what we think long term, right? You just said he's like a Tyus Bowser mini. So that's like what you want long term. But what are they going to do with him day one? What are they doing with him this season? What kind of role can he play in limited snaps and in just limited need? But, if injury does happen, he might be called upon. And that could, then you'll see very quickly how ready he is.
Yeah, Dalen Hayes has to stay ready because, let's go over the group. Oweh hasn't been asked to cover. So he hasn't played football very long. So that's a big ask. Ferguson, not a coverage guy. McPhee, not a coverage guy. So you look around, it's Bowser. And then if you need another coverage linebacker, it's going to be Dalen Hayes. So how they use him is going to be fascinating. Oweh has the physical skills to cover. There's no doubt about it. I think that he'll be asked to do that more and more as the season goes along. But yeah, man, I just mentioned Dalen Hayes. I didn't mean to stray off topic just because I think that his presence really prohibits Chris Smith and Chauncey Rivers from making the roster.
Now, how many edge players do we think the Ravens are going to keep? Is this a 5-player, 6-player? Because one of the things I was thinking about is there a chance that Ferguson maybe doesn't make the team this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long road for Jalen Ferguson, and I have to admit, I hate saying that because I really like him, but when you look at how deep we are at safety, which we already went over, are you going to keep a 6th edge, or would you rather cut Ardarius Washington? Numbers are going to have to work out here somewhere. And when I look at the versatility we have in that group, as well as what we have on what people would call defensive linemen, I don't think there's room for 6 outside linebackers on this team. So yeah, it's going to be a struggle for Ferguson. And I think that at the stadium practice, if you guys really want to watch it, go back and watch it again. Look at the reps that Ferguson took. It told to me through my scout's eyes, I look at everything through evaluation. I've realized that they're not in pads. So when you're not in pads, I don't know if you've ever guys have practiced this. The only thing you have are your hands. It's the only thing you really can use because the offensive linemen really aren't bodying you up. They're putting their hands up, and then you're practicing your swipes or trying to get around them. And Ferguson, even in that situation, was not using his hands. He has the least active hands I think I've seen of any Ravens outside linebacker. You would think he would learn from a guy like McPhee, who has those power hands and a nice bull rush. But, Jalen Ferguson has a very good bull rush, I think an NFL quality bull rush. The thing is, when you're going against offensive tackles in the NFL, you better have something else or they can sit on that bull rush and it's really not going to be that effective. So, Jalen Ferguson, man, he's really going to have to step it up to be worthy of keeping. And if you want to look for a trait, it's his hand usage. What is he doing? Is he just putting it in the tackle's chest like he's done for the first 2 years of his career? Or does he have a swipe? Does he have a cross move? Does he have a counter? Does he have a spin? I haven't seen any of this in 2 years, not once.
No. You can also learn from Houston, man. I was watching his hype video when he got signed. I was like, man, yeah, he can play.
Yeah,
it's like I knew him from around the league, but I never watched a film highlights of him.
Yeah, dude, he I think he's going to teach Oweh really well because Ferguson's a different style player. But man, if you watch Justin Houston, the opposite of what I just said about Ferguson, his hands are awesome, man. He's got all kinds of tricks in the book, dip and rip, cross chop. He can do it all, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
I was seeing that too.
Yeah, that's a good point about Ferguson. Yeah, one of the things that always really bothered me the first 2 years, I hate to say this, but he reminds me of Boykin in a way of just he's really good at one thing, but that's it. It's just so much tape from the first few years. He just doesn't use his hands. He doesn't really have a whole lot of explosion off the line. And it felt like a lot of the pressures and sacks that he would get would just the play would break down. It would be a coverage sack, basically. He just was not quick enough to be able to get to the ball. And, one of the big things I feel like we learned last year was that, he could, even though he stepped it up in run defense, he just wasn't good enough in anything else to justify having that spot. Jahad Ward got that final spot. And, he was inactive for most of the second half of the season, I think. So
it was the last 4 games. If you remember, Jahad Ward was inactive at first, but Ferguson's lack of flexibility is another thing working against him.
Yeah.
The Ravens picked Ward over him, in my opinion, because Ward could slide inside and rush. And Ferguson that's really not his game. So I really wish I had a more positive spin. I apologize for any Jalen Ferguson fans out there. I just haven't seen it, man. And the preseason or the preseason games themselves and that joint practice with Carolina are going to mean a lot to his future with the Ravens.
Not to steal like something you told me before the show, but when I was talking to Jason, he was like, when you look at a prospect, if they do one thing really well in college, they're probably not going to make it in the NFL. They need to have 2 things at least. And I think that's kind of what we're getting at with Ferguson is that he never really had that second thing and he never developed it. And unless it happens, overnight, he has some kind of renaissance. We're not seeing it this year yet. And like you said, it's going to be a long road.
Remember that, Alec. Remember that, Alec. That's going to pay off later in your draft boards because a lot of people get caught up on one particular skill trait, whatever it is, man. You got to, like even the Henry Ruggs, he better be able to break it off and run an out route, or else these NFL corners and safeties are going to be able to sit on that deep ball.
I never understood that pick. I was joking about it, and then they did it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, they literally did what I was joking about. They can't help themselves. All right, let's go and talk about cornerback. This is another very interesting room. I was super ecstatic when we got Shaun Wade. I think he was a huge steal, fell down the draft board. But then you got guys like Amon Marshall, who never got healthy. We haven't really seen anything from him. They re-signed Devontae Harris, who had some moments at the end of last year. Khalil Dorsey, Quiz Westry. How is this group going to shape up, and what do we expect to see going into these preseason games?
Well, I tell you, I forgot to write this down, but the number of corners that we've kept the last 2 years has been varied. I think it was a range of 2 or 3 players. But yeah, so how they're used in the preseason is going to be key again. I think the true battle is who is going to be the slot receiver backing up Tavon Young. Whoever that is got the inside track. So if I'm looking at Shaun Wade, this is his time to step up and shine. I like that pick. I think obviously he's going to make the roster. But if the Ravens question his performance, that may open the door for somebody like Dorsey. I think that's a long shot. And then the most interesting guy of the group by far is Westry, 6'4" with a 4.36 outside corner. That says it all to me. Like I have not yet to see him practice, but if you're 6'4" and run a 4.36 and can press and can run, and apparently he's like unstoppable in Madden or something too, which I thought was pretty funny. I don't play Madden, so I don't know, but yeah, Chris Westry, cannot wait to see just what he's doing.
Interesting. Yeah, one name on this list, Devontae Harris, actually, I should have brought him up when we were talking about the Dimeback, but this guy, Jason, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. Did he play any Dimeback snaps or any like that deep safety role snaps last year when he was with us, or was it purely cornerback?
Yeah, he is mostly used in the slot. I don't recall him off the top of my head. I could be wrong being a deep safety, but the Ravens did use some 4 cornerback dimes. They got picked on in that package, if you remember, in the Steelers game at home.
Yeah.
Terrell Bonds, they kept going at him. So Devontae Harris kind of shored that up. I think it was a way for them to get 6 defensive backs on the field because they didn't trust Levine or Richards or any of the other guys to actually play on the defensive side. They were special teams only. So this cornerback battle, I think, has something to do with how they categorize Jimmy and Brandon Stevens, to go back to my original point. Because I really think the number is between 10 and 12 between those two groups, where we kept 10 one year and 12 the next. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I do know that between 2019 and 2020, the number of defensive backs we had fluctuated, whereas other positions, you could say like receiver, we're going to keep 6 or maybe 7, or inside linebackers, we're probably going to keep 4. Like the defensive backs is a very flexible. Somebody can play their way into that position. So as far as what you're looking for, I would just say basic football fan stuff. Like who's stepping up? Who's stepping up? Keep your eye on these guys when they're in the game. Watch what happens at the line of scrimmage before they dart out of your TV screen. See who's making plays on the ball. I mean, we're all going to be in the same boat for this. If I get the all 22 back, I will be more than happy to point out, and dig into all this because this is my favorite position. I played a little safety myself, so I love the defensive back position. Love it.
Yeah, I hope we get it back. It's really frustrating, particularly from like me. I was kind of banking on it this preseason to be able to watch the games because I know like for one of them I won't be able to watch live. I'm like, oh man, if you're not gonna have the games, like, how am I supposed to watch this like in any like good way? So kind of disappointed. I love the Shaun Wade pick. I think he makes a lot of sense. Like you said, he'll make the team. It's really a question of if one of these other guys is going to be able to show enough to warrant a spot, particularly on such a loaded roster. You might be able to sneak one of them. That's I think a valid point too. Particularly a guy like Imam Marshall. They could definitely cut him if they liked him because I mean, no one's seen him. I just think they could keep it that way if they really wanted to. So we'll see.
Yeah, and Imam Marshall is a guy who peaked very early, and I believe he was California Player of the Year. He was very decorated when he came into USC, stepped on the scene, had himself a nice, freshman or sophomore season, whatever was his first full big season, and then struggled towards the end, kind of dropped in the draft, almost like Shaun Wade did. But, Wade had a lot of things going against him last year, Alec. I don't know if you remember, but he was fighting through an injury, a position change. He lost a couple of members of his family. He decided to play through it. And like Rashad Bateman, the Ravens kind of threw out the 2020 and leaned on the full season, regular season tape. They did not dock a guy for having a down year or an off year in 2020. They went by his high moments and what he looked like when he was going right. So I applaud the Ravens for that. And that seems like organizational philosophy. I mean, COVID obviously is, it's a pandemic tragedy. People were feeling it everywhere. But the Ravens said, you know what? You're going to face adversity in the NFL, a ton of it. So who loves football? What are your motivators? Do you want to play football? Is it your sanctuary? You can disagree with that philosophy if you want and say that's kind of cruel and heartless and you shouldn't penalize guys who decided to sit out. But we didn't draft one guy who sat out 2020 in this draft, not a single one. And in fact, we banked on guys who played through it and their value dropped because they played through it. So kind of says something, I think, about DaCosta and the Ravens philosophy.
I think you bring up a great point there. We were actually talking about that going into the draft and in the preview episode of how this year's draft was kind of different, and you could see players slip through the cracks who maybe would be drafted higher in previous years because it was just such unprecedented time that and it hit the college football harder than it hit the pros, obviously, with all the shortened seasons for different teams. Like you said, players sitting out, other players playing through adversity. Wade is definitely a guy I think who could have been drafted higher if it was a normal season, and could end up being one of those potential steals that we talked about could happen for teams. I actually didn't know what you mentioned there about some of the stuff he went through, but that is exactly what the Ravens love drafting, is guys who are mentally tough, guys who can come through adversity and maybe have a couple years where it takes them to acclimate to the bigger role that the Ravens have for them. But I think there's a lot of intrigue there with a guy like Shaun Wade.
I mean, Peter, he was going to be a top 15 pick, probably, definitely a first round pick. If he would have just said, I'm good, COVID, no problem. Hey, this COVID stuff's rough. I'm sitting out. See you guys at the 2021 draft. I'll be there on the first day. I might even get invited to the green room. But he's one of those guys that couldn't stay away from football. I think his injury was a toe or something in his foot. If not a toe, it was a lower injury. And that man played through it, bro. Like, I'll give him a lot of credit. He could have just played after 2 games, said, look, I'm hurt. I'm out of here. He stuck it out for his team. I had the team goal in mind. And, like I said, that's something that the Ravens are definitely into character. as they rightfully should. And I could see Sean Wade going either way. I see high upside, but high bust side with him, just because it's hard to get what I saw last year out of my head, where his change of direction didn't look good and his tackling looked sloppy. He was getting pushed around a lot. And, I could definitely see a toe injury affecting that, but I want to see it. You know what I mean? I want to see him start dominating. And I think this preseason games are going to be key for him.
Totally agree. Those toe, like lower ankle, like area injuries are the classic ones that you can kind of play through, but you're not the same. Those are those ones.
Peter Bowler's career.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm just even thinking about myself here. Like, I'm not an athlete, but like I turned my ankle back in May and I'm still like not 100% on it. It's ridiculous. It just like lingers, right? And you're like, come on, it's been months. You think it'd be okay. And it feels okay most of the time, but every once in a while, and I imagine you're playing that high of a level and you need to make that play, your tackling goes out. I remember, I think it was, I forget which show it was on. I'm sorry. Maybe it was two guys watching film, but somebody was talking about like at the end of the season, you're fatiguing. And that's why like the tackling gets worse, because if you're not in shape enough, you're not able to do the things that you thought you could do earlier. And you start relying on just like running into people rather than, practical, like correct form. And I think injury kind of plays the same way. Or if you're injured, you can't stay in the best shape, right? You're like losing some of those reps. You're not able to like practice as much and things like that. So I think all that plays a part, and Sean Wade could definitely bounce back. I think to wrap up this conversation, we got to talk about QB2. The assumption is this year the Ravens are not going to be holding, particularly like we said, there's so many players on this team that we want to keep. They're not going to be holding 3 quarterbacks. So it's between Trace McSorley and Huntley. And I think going into the preseason, a lot of people were leaning on Huntley just based off the game film that we saw. But I know, Jason, you have some real big thoughts on this, because those games when they get away from you, you don't think should be valued as high.
Well, Alec, I love you and everything, but I actually, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I think we're going to keep 3 quarterbacks because, I mean, we only have 2 right now for something that has nothing to do with injuries. So I think that might play a big role. I think the Ravens have to keep their ear to the grindstone. Somebody might like Huntley. I think somebody would like McSorley for sure.
Yeah.
So it's something that, if you could sneak one by to the practice squad, sure. But, I kind of like the idea of keeping 3. But what was your specific question, Alec? I apologize there.
Well, I think you're right. These are not players you're going to sneak. I think they have interest across the league. So if you do cut one, do not expect them to come back, which is, I think, a game that the Ravens love to play, and they usually get away with it, of cutting people they like because they think they'll be able to find them on the practice squad. I don't think they'll get away with it with these players. So I think when you're looking at the competition, I guess the question is, based off of your remark of you think we keep 3, what are we looking for to either see a winner, not just like, plays, but maybe the kinds of packages we run with these players, the confidence we do to maintain the offensive continuity, or just how do you expect us to watch these players and compete for either a roster spot or to both solidify they got to both be here?
Yeah, I think it's the total game. I think Huntley has an advantage in mobility, but Trace is not a statue. And if you saw at the stadium practice, there were a couple of old school read options, and Trace didn't hesitate, man. Like, you think about his injury last year. I was curious as to how long it would take him to come back, but here he is at the first open practice, and he's running a read option, so that's a good sign. And then when I look at where Trace has the advantage, to me, it's the timing of his throws and his accuracy. I thought it was funny that the touchdown pass to Hollywood last year, a lot of people were ragging on Trace for being behind. But if you go back and look at that play, and we don't have the film to do it now, Trace put it exactly where it had to be. There was a safety bearing down on him, and Trace is like one of them pitchers that knows he doesn't have a 99-mile-an-hour fastball. Laid it right over the linebacker or whoever else it was. Maybe it was another corner in front of the safety. Gave Hollywood plenty of time to not only catch it, but turn around and adjust and take that play to the house. So I love, and then think about the Browns game, the toss to Willie Snead. another toss to Andrews, I believe, where the ball came out clean and on time. Like what his arm is not beautiful, but his quarterbacking IQ and the timing. I believe in Huntley. I believe in McSorley for that in both of those qualities. Huntley, I don't have as good of a read on as a pure thrower, but man, like sometimes some of his deep balls look really good to me. And this is going to be very interesting to me in preseason because I don't think that fans have or evaluators have a really good idea of what either one of them can do. Like our information is limited. I would love to sit up here and say, oh, I like this one better because of X, Y, and Z. We barely have X. You know what I mean? Like there ain't a Y and Z. So it's like what do you look for? I want to say everything. I'm hoping that they both get equal run with the first team. I want to see both of them get an equal chance here. And the way they were rotating them at the practice Saturday and from the practice reports, I think they both are getting run with the first team.
Yeah, in a way, it works out nice that doesn't seem like Lamar will be playing. I mean, maybe he'll play the first game. I don't know. It's hard to say if he'll play the first game. But if not, that's a great opportunity to maybe even swap those two quarterbacks back and forth each drive. You hate to do that for a real game, right? Because you want to keep that continuity, that momentum and rhythm. But in the preseason, you can probably just get away with that. So curious to see how they play it. Curious to see how they perform. We could be 3 games later and have a clear number 2, or it could still be kind of a toss-up. They may both play pretty well. So, Jason, really appreciate your time on the show. We learned a lot today, I think, and we'll definitely love to have you again. Let's have everyone be reminded where they can find your work.
Sure. Thank you. I just wanted to first say thanks, and I'm willing to support anybody. I really enjoy your guys' professionalism and the way you talk about football. Football to me is family. It always has been. It doesn't matter, rich or poor, what color you are, what religion, like all that goes out the window. I learned that at a very early age playing football, that these guys cared about me more than people that were supposed to care about me did. So that extends from the fans to your ex-teammates. They'll always be your ex-teammates. And, we could probably argue about a lot of different things, but in football, it's good natured and we all care. We all have the same outlook. We want the Ravens to win. So football is family. I wanted to say that first. As far as my work, find me, Huddle It Up Films. It's not Huddle Up, it's Huddle It Up. Huddle Up stuff is taking. I'm a Huddle It Up guy. So Huddle It Up Films, Twitter, YouTube. Would love to have you be part of the family. Please like videos, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff that YouTubers are supposed to say that I always forget. But yeah, man, I would love to come back. And anytime you want to talk about players, I'm an open book. This show could have went another 2 hours. I would have been happy. So it's all good, man.
It was a lot of fun, and you can follow us, Ravens_recap on Twitter. Find us, ravensrecap.com, and you can also email us feedback@ravensrecap.com. We'll be back talking about the first preseason game, unless something crazy happens. That's probably the next show. And when we're back, hopefully we'll have a better insight of all these competition battles we were talking about. But thanks again for listening, and don't forget to tell a friend. Football's back.